Hello, Zachary.
Hi.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. It is truly a privilege and look forward to learning about your work at C40. And before getting into the nitty-gritty, could you please just provide an overview of what C40 is, as well as its unique model?
Yeah. So we're a climate leadership organization. We're guided by a mantra of you need to be able to measure it to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we work with cities to develop climate action plans and then to help them raise their ambition to achieve a Paris compliant future.
Amazing. So to summarize, you have a team that engages with multiple cities across the US.
The world. So
Across the world. Wow.
we're 97 cities around the world, and it's
see.
a network of mayors. So it was for mayors by mayors. So we have a global staff that is supporting mayors develop and deploy their climate strategies. So we use a peer sharing model that helps them raise ambition so that they can take more ambitious action, more ambitious climate action that's equitable and resilient, and really ensuring that their residents and the residents of the world have a sustainable future.
Got it. So how was it started?
So it started in 2006 by the mayor of London and the mayor of New York City that came together to say, oh, we've got some big challenges. What kind of ideas and solutions can we work on together? And so it uses that kind of global collaborative nature of, well, they might be in different countries, they might speak different languages. Because of their population, they have similar challenges and thus similar solutions. And so what we know is that there's a lot of commonality between megacities. And these megacities have the scale and the opportunity to take a really big action and impact to deliver a more sustainable, resilient future.
Understood. So is it fair to say that hypothetically, if there are 10 variables which go into a climate action plan in one city, maybe 6 of those variables would translate to another city, and then the remaining would be retailored according to the specific needs of that relative city, which you're providing the template and building on the template to?
So I don't know if I've ever thought about like the number of transferability, but we have helped all of the cities in C40 develop a Paris compliant climate action plan. And so they include a number of sectoral activities. I'm the director of food and waste at C40. And we're working with cities to raise ambition to show what's possible. So we have what we call these accelerators that are science-based targets that show what is the highest level of science-based actions that cities should be taking. So for instance, on food systems, we have what we call the Good Food Cities Accelerator. And so it's not a declaration, just a simple statement of interest, but they're actually delivering on it. So we've got 16 cities from around the world, New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, that are working together to use their procurement power as cities are the biggest purchasers of food in a city, to align their procurement to the planetary health diet, to align the food environment to ensure that all residents have access to food that's good for people, planet, and prosperity, and to reduce food loss and waste by 50%. So these cities are actually showing how they're doing that, creating a model that other cities can follow. On the waste side of work, we have 2 accelerators that are looking at cities delivering a pathway towards zero waste. So for our global north cities, it's reducing waste generation by 15%. It's reducing waste disposal by 50% and increasing diversion to 70%. So all of these we've got 23 cities that are showing what is possible and how they're doing it. And in the global south, we've got cities that are working on improving universal collection, managing their organic waste, reducing emissions by 30%. Really impactful and important actions showing what is possible in a model for other cities to follow.
That makes a lot of sense. And practically, how does it actually play out in the food accelerator example?
Yeah.
could you walk us through what the process looks like for, say, the different cities to collaborate with one another, what C40's role is within that dynamic?
Sure.
And just shed light into how the actual project and accelerator unfolds.
Yeah. So we use a peer sharing model. So city officials, the lead officials that are overseeing a food policy team in the city, in either the mayor's environmental office or on their own team, will come together with peer cities from around the world to kind of share the common challenges. So just last night we had a webinar on our waste, in our waste network, that was looking at examples from Melbourne and Sydney, looking at a dehydrator that Melbourne is piloting in their city so that they can dehydrate organic material at the building level, which really reduces the transportation costs and has a big opportunity for replication and scaling. So really what we're doing through the network is we're bringing these incredibly intelligent leaders from cities around the world to bring their challenges, creating a closed door environment for them to share what's working well and what they're struggling with, so they can then brainstorm for solutions to de-risk more ambitious behavior. So when we look at New York's example of making plant-based meals by default the first option in hospitals that the city runs, that's a model that other cities are looking at and trying to figure out, how could we replicate that? So then there's an actual case study. So a mayor that's sitting in a city around the world could say, that seems like a great idea, why don't we do that too? And so we do that kind of sharing of challenges and replicating successes.
So will your team write the case study and then provide that case study to a mayor in another city that similarly wants to achieve relatable targets?
So we facilitate the knowledge sharing. Sometimes it's literal case studies, other times it's webinars, or we'll do study tours, but it's very much listening to what cities are trying to achieve, helping them position that in the context, and then identify solutions. So whether it's technical assistance, whether it's doing a study tour so they can see it firsthand, what we do is we facilitate that information sharing to lower those transaction costs.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And often do cities approach you to be able to figure out a solution to whatever particular challenge that they're trying to address within the climate realm? Or does your team also see what's happening in another city and then educate different cities about what is possible within this realm? And if both, could you just provide insight into how those interactions generally vary, and do you find it to be somewhat challenging to convince new cities to adopt whatever climate solution within the food and waste spectrum that you're trying to advocate for?
As a network of cities, we are not in the business of telling cities what to do. We help identify science-based targets of what the best opportunities for action are. And then cities individually, because we are a climate leadership organization, come up with solutions. Some are extremely successful. Others need some time to work through the kinks. And so what our network, I think, does really well is we provide a platform for that sharing. So it's a mix of supporting cities develop the climate action plans, supporting them on the delivery of those action plans, but also identifying opportunities. So I think an example that I was talking about on an earlier panel today, extended producer responsibility is one of those big opportunities for how do we reduce the amount of waste that's being generated per capita. Plastics pollution is a huge challenge. How do we come up with solutions that can start to address that? So there are a few cities, and just wrote some case studies that we published on our website for the Towards Zero Waste Accelerator that I'm sure you will enjoy reading if you haven't already. We wrote up a number of case studies on what cities are doing and looking at extended producer responsibility, looking at how cities are creating more circular economy, creating better, greener jobs, creating a more healthy, cleaner, greener city that's more resilient. So some incredible different case studies that show what's possible.
Amazing. You did touch upon this slightly earlier, but could you provide more insight into how you actually develop or what the process is like for developing the science-based targets?
Yeah. So working with cities and working with research teams, the science is relatively well understood. We know what we need to do. So our work is helping to translate that science into what is applicable for cities and then help cities deliver. So we're very much an acceleration of action type institution. We're philanthropically funded. We are working all around the world. We have regional teams on 6 continents, and we really are driven by what the priorities are that the cities are working. They're most keen to be working on together. And then we identify the opportunities to help them overcome their challenges.
Got it. This might be a somewhat broad question, but would be really curious to hear about whether there are any key lessons learned in terms of being able to actually translate those targets into on-the-ground implementation when you engage with cities. Have you found anything to not work versus like any effective approaches when it comes to actually successfully translating those targets into action?
I think an incredibly exciting place to be working in the climate space is with cities, because cities are the form of government that's closest to the people. Everybody knows who their mayor is. You might not have access to your senator, you might not have access to your president. You might, you're important. But most people probably don't. But everybody knows who their mayor is. And so mayors respond to those issues that are closest to the residents. Transportation, waste, food, and they're taking action to make their streets cleaner, greener, healthier, making their cities more walkable. And so the entry point for these actions that then scale up create a ripple effect and show what is possible. And so I think that the biggest lesson learned is that cities have a huge amount of power and are doing a ton of climate activities. When it comes to food, that we're seeing some incredible actions that mayors are taking to reduce the impact of the food system by reducing food loss and waste. Milan has got this great program where they've supported retailers to recover surplus food so that it's not thrown out, and it donated to people in need. So it solves one problem, food waste, and solves another problem, food insecurity, by helping to bridge those connections. That's just one simple example of what mayors are doing on a daily basis to really make their residents' lives better and really improve the climate.
During your tenure at C40, what achievement are you most proud of?
I think it's a great question. And I've been with C40 since 2007, so there are an incredibly large number of things that I'm proud of. What I'm most excited about is just at this last COP in Dubai, we launched a program with the US State Department, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and a number of other partners through the SCALE initiative that's looking to address methane emissions, which is one of these major sources of global warming. And we launched a program called the Low Methane Initiative, so lowering organic waste methane, where we're looking to reduce at least 1 million tons of methane per year by 2030, mobilizing $10 billion in finance and supporting 40 jurisdictions. So I am extraordinarily optimistic and proud that we are mobilizing a huge amount of resources, working with national governments and their subnational jurisdictions to address this really challenging problem that is going to be an opportunity for action. It's really going to make lives better. And so the thing that I'm most proud about being at C40 is making people's lives better, because we're working on food systems, and my team is working on food systems, making it easier for people to eat food that's good for people, planet, and prosperity, and reducing emissions that are really one of the biggest sources of short-term global warming is methane, and that's coming from organic waste, that's coming from municipal solid waste. It's a huge opportunity for action that hasn't been really addressed, and we're helping to draw attention to that.
And what are next steps with this project?
Yeah. So right now we're in the process of developing work plans with cities, identifying those projects, mobilizing the finance, filling the gaps, because we're working with incredible partners. Just recently, just yesterday, one of our partners, Carbon Mapper, published some data showing that a lot of landfills in the US are producing a huge amount of methane that we didn't think was coming from these sanitary landfills. So there's a big opportunity for action around the world, global north and global south. And the next steps in this program are very much operationalizing the plans of we've got the political commitment, we're identifying the resource, we know what needs to be done, so now it's working with all these partners together to actually deliver that action on the ground.
Which probably also involves a lot of private sector engagement. Could you speak about how your team within this initiative is able to engage with private sector stakeholders and whether you find that they're receptive to your outreach?
I think that the opportunities are so enormous of engaging with the private sector. I think that it is an ongoing opportunity to figure out the best model for engagement, because there's a lot of interest, but it's figuring out where the most impactful areas are. We're seeing some incredible work happening on the food side of things, with the private sector engaging on food systems to reduce the consumption-based emissions impacts of the food that they're selling, reducing food loss and waste. When it comes to waste management, the private sector again plays a huge role. We're involved in a number of conversations adjacent to the methane conversation about plastics. We cannot simply recycle our way out of this. So a new business model is absolutely going to be required, which is presenting an exciting opportunity, I think, for the private sector to think about how do we do things differently that is really going to be good for the planet and reduces the amount of single-use materials that are flooding our streets and our oceans, and contributing to massive challenges that I think that the private sector has a huge opportunity to collaborate with us and provide some great solutions towards.
Any thoughts on what some of those solutions could be?
I think that part of it is going to be reducing the amount of single-use materials that are being produced. So more circular economy solutions, more reuse solutions. I think that there is going to be a solution that involves extended producer responsibility. So less thinking that it's an individual decision about whether you're a good person or a bad person if you're recycling, but coming up with system solutions that look at how do we reduce the amount of waste that's being created versus how can we provide a service. So in London, they've, I think, eliminated over 5 million single-use plastic water bottles by creating a program that looks at water bottle refill stations. So that's an opportunity for private sector engagement to sell a service, but to do refill versus selling a single-use bottle.
Amazing. And now shifting gears a little bit to the personal career development side of things, would love to hear your perspective on any advice that you would have for young professionals who are trying to figure out where within the climate field they might fit in.
Yeah.
And provide this perspective through the lens of your own experiences and how you were able to develop your own insight into where you wanted to fit in.
Yeah, I think it's a question that I'm asked quite frequently because I think that we are in a climate crisis. And I think that young people now recognize that we are in a climate crisis and more needs to be done. So I actually think that everybody can be involved in the climate space. Mm-hmm. It's about what you eat, what you wear, how you get around the city, how you heat your house. There are all these kinds of things that each one of those you could actually find incredibly rewarding economic activity, or you could volunteer doing something. So there are all these opportunities. But so in terms of career advice, I think that it's a mindset, because I think that you could bring a sustainability mindset into any job. I work for a nonprofit that is a climate change organization, but every organization can either have a positive benefit on the world or a negative. And so you, whatever job you take, can ensure that you are doing good. So I have an MBA, and after my MBA, I found a job that was more of a strategy job, helping to close down a dump site in Addis Ababa, the traditional post-MBA route. I think that there are a huge amount of jobs in the nonprofit space. I work very closely with cities. I think that cities offer an incredible amount of opportunity for jobs having a tangible and material impact. Consulting firms, finance. We're working with the investment community. We're working in the private sector. Your last question was about how does the private sector get involved. All of these have functions that are either formal sustainability functions, or you can make the role a sustainability function by ensuring that what you're doing is a good corporate global citizen. So hopefully that's not a non-answer to your question about how to get involved, because I think that there's an incredibly large number of jobs that can have an impact that might not have sustainability director in the title of them, but the functions of what they're doing. And so for anybody that's interested in finding a perhaps more titled sustainability job, there are, I think, a great number of jobs that involve strategy, that involve implementation. I think just rolling your sleeves up and getting involved with an organization, volunteering, is a great way to find some opportunities.
Thank you so much, Zachary, for your time today and for providing all of this really insightful perspective. Thank you.
Thanks. That was great.